The warm summer sun shone brightly over a beautiful green meadow. Wildflowers of every color swayed gently in the breeze, filling the air with a sweet fragrance. Butterflies fluttered from flower to flower, and birds sang cheerful songs from the branches of nearby trees. It was the perfect day to enjoy the sunshine. Along a narrow path between the tall grasses, a small ant marched steadily forward. She carried a tiny grain of wheat on her back. The grain was almost as large as she was, but she moved with determination. Step by step, she made her way toward her nest, hidden beneath a large oak tree. When she reached the nest, she carefully placed the grain inside a storage chamber. Then, without wasting a moment, she turned around and headed back to the field. The ant had been working since early morning. She searched for seeds, grains, and small pieces of food wherever she could find them. Every time she discovered something useful, she carried it back to her nest. The work was tiring, but she never complained. As she crossed the meadow once again, the sound of beautiful music floated through the air. Tiare lala, tiare lala. The ant looked up and saw a grasshopper sitting comfortably on a broad green leaf. He held a tiny violin and played a lively tune. His eyes sparkled with happiness as he tapped his feet to the rhythm. The grasshopper loved summer. He loved the warm sunshine, the gentle breeze, and the endless days filled with fun. While other creatures searched for food or built homes, he spent most of his time singing, dancing, and making music. The melody echoed across the meadow, attracting a few curious insects who gathered nearby to listen. The grasshopper noticed the ant passing below. "Good morning, ant," he called cheerfully. "Good morning, grasshopper," replied the ant as she continued walking. "Why are you always working?" asked the grasshopper. "You hurry back and forth all day long. Don't you ever get tired?" The ant paused for a moment. "Of course I get tired," she answered. "But winter will come one day. When it does, food will be difficult to find. I must gather enough supplies while the weather is warm." The grasshopper laughed and played a playful note on his violin. "Winter," he said. "Look around you, the sky is blue, the flowers are blooming, and food is everywhere. Why worry about something so far away?" The ant glanced across the sunny meadow. "It may seem far away," she replied, "but seasons change quickly. If I prepare now, I will have nothing to fear when the cold days arrive." The grasshopper shook his head. "You think too much about work," he said with a grin. "Come sit here with me. Listen to the music, enjoy the sunshine. Life is meant to be fun for a moment." The ant listened to the cheerful melody drifting through the air. It was pleasant and relaxing, but then she smiled politely. "Music is wonderful," she said. "Perhaps I will enjoy it after my work is finished. Right now I must continue gathering food." The grasshopper shrugged. "As you wish," he replied. He lifted his violin and began playing again. The lively tune danced through the meadow as butterflies fluttered nearby. Meanwhile, the ant picked up another grain and continued her journey. Back and forth she traveled beneath the warm summer sun, preparing for the future one small step at a time. The grasshopper watched her disappear into the tall grass and laughed softly. Then he leaned back on his leaf, closed his eyes, and continued playing music, never imagining how quickly the seasons would change. The golden days of summer slowly faded away. The bright flowers that once covered the meadow began to wilt, and the green leaves turned shades of yellow. Orange and red cool winds swept across the fields, carrying the first signs of winter. Day by day the weather grew colder. While the seasons changed, the ant continued her work. Throughout autumn, she carefully organized the food she had gathered during the summer. Her underground nest was filled with grains, seeds, and other supplies. Every storage chamber was neatly arranged and ready for the long winter ahead. The grasshopper, however, paid little attention to the changing world around him. He still spent his days sitting on leaves, playing cheerful songs on his violin and enjoying the crisp air. Whenever he noticed the ant carrying food or repairing parts of her nest, he simply smiled and continued his music. Winter is still far away, he often told himself. But winter was much closer than he realized. One morning, dark clouds covered the sky. A cold wind blew across the meadow, bending the dry grass and rattling the bare branches of the trees. The temperature dropped quickly. Soon tiny snowflakes began falling from the sky. At first, the grasshopper watched them with curiosity. "How beautiful," he said. But within a few hours, the snow became heavier. The meadow disappeared beneath a blanket of white. The flowers were gone. The leaves had fallen. The seeds and grains that once covered the ground were now hidden beneath the snow. The grasshopper suddenly felt a chill. He rubbed his arms and pulled his legs closer to his body. "This weather is colder than I expected," he muttered. The next day was even worse. Strong winds held across the frozen fields. The grasshopper searched for food, hopping from place to place. Everywhere he looked, the ground was covered in snow. He dug through small snowdrifts, hoping to find seeds underneath, but found nothing hour after hour. He searched. His stomach growled loudly. The cheerful songs he once played were gone. His violin hung silently by his side as he wandered through the freezing meadow. By evening he was exhausted. "I should have gathered food," he whispered. The realization struck him like the icy wind all summer and autumn. He had laughed, played music, and ignored the ants' advice. Now he had no food, no shelter, and no way to survive the harsh winter. As the days passed, the situation became even more difficult. The grasshopper grew weaker from hunger. His legs trembled whenever he tried to hop. Snow continued to fall, and the cold seemed to seep into every part of his body. One particularly freezing night, he looked across the snowy meadow and noticed a faint, warm glow beneath the roots of a large oak tree. It was the ant's nest inside. The ant was safe and comfortable. Her home was warm, and she had plenty of food stored away. The grasshopper hesitated for a moment. He felt embarrassed after all. He had laughed at the ant's hard work and ignored her warnings. But he knew he had no other choice. Gathering his remaining strength, he slowly made his way through the deep snow. The cold wind pushed against him with every step. Finally, he reached the entrance to the ant's nest. His body shivered from the freezing air. With a trembling hand, he gently knocked on the door. Then he waited, hoping someone would answer. The cold winter wind whistled through the trees as the grasshopper stood outside the ant's nest. Snow covered the ground around him, and his legs trembled from exhaustion. He had spent days searching for food, but the frozen meadow offered nothing hungry. Cold and weak, he waited nervously. After knocking on the door, a moment later the wooden door slowly opened. The ant looked outside and was surprised to see the grasshopper standing there. His cheerful smile was gone. His violin hung silently from his shoulder, and his eyes showed both sadness and worry. "Grasshopper," said the ant, "you look exhausted." "What happened?" The grasshopper lowered his head. "You were right," he said quietly. "Winter came and I was not prepared. I spent all summer and autumn playing music and enjoying myself. Now I have no food and nowhere warm to stay." For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The grasshopper felt ashamed. He remembered laughing when the ant worked hard during the warm months. He remembered ignoring her advice and believing that summer would last forever. "I understand if you do not want to help me," he continued. "I made a mistake." "I should have listened." The ant looked at him carefully. Although she remembered the grasshopper's careless attitude, she could also see how much he had suffered. The cold winter had already taught him a lesson. Without hesitation, the ant stepped aside. "Come inside," she said kindly. "You cannot stay out there in this weather." The grasshopper looked up in surprise. "Really?" he asked. "Of course," replied the ant. "Everyone deserves a chance to learn from their mistakes." The grasshopper slowly entered the nest. The difference was incredible. Inside, the air was warm and comfortable. The walls were dry, and small lanterns filled the rooms with a gentle golden glow. Shelves were neatly stacked with grain, seeds, and food gathered during the summer. The grasshopper stared in amazement. "You prepared for everything," he said. The ant smiled. "I simply planned ahead." She led him to a small table and placed a bowl of food in front of him. "Eat," she said. The grasshopper gratefully accepted the meal. He had never tasted food so delicious. With each bite, he felt his strength slowly returning. "Thank you," he said sincerely. For the next few days, the grasshopper stayed in the ant's nest, while the snowstorms continued outside. The ant shared food with him and gave him a warm place to rest. As they spent time together, the grasshopper often thought about the choices he had made. During the summer, he realized that fun and enjoyment were important. But responsibility was important too. One evening, while they sat near a warm fire, the grasshopper turned to the ant. "I have learned something valuable," he said. "What is it?" asked the ant. The grasshopper smiled. "There is a time for work and a time for play. Music brings happiness, but preparation brings security. If I had balanced both, I would not have faced so much trouble." The ant nodded proudly. "That is a wise lesson." When spring finally arrived and the snow melted away, the grasshopper began a new chapter in his life. He still loved playing his violin and sharing music with others. But he also worked hard whenever it was necessary from that day.